welcome to another episode of What Else You Got with Mitch and Margot. I'm Mitch, and I'm with Margot. What else you got?
Hey Mitch, did you know that we're coming into fall season?
Well, I just know pumpkin spice has made a comeback.
Yep. And so as we come into fall, it's also known as harvest season because, that's when farmers and gardeners begin to gather in the bounty that they've been working on all growing season. And so they harvest those crops, bring them in, and they start to preserve them for winter months. So as we come into harvest season, my question for you is, what do you plan to preserve in your life this season?
I haven't given that any thought. That's the first I heard the question.
Do you think it's a do you think it's a time to only preserve food, or are there other things in your life that you would like to strive to preserve?
Well, I was going to say memories
Oh,
was what I was going to come up with,
that's
but
good.
because I don't have a garden, and a lot of the stuff I'm working on is inorganic, so it doesn't break down really. So, yeah, that's a tricky question for me. What are you trying to preserve?
Well, first, let's talk about the one you came up with, preserving memories. What are you doing? What have you done? What are you doing? What do you strive to do to preserve memories in your life?
So there's I guess the old way of doing it, where keep mementos in a box. Sometimes put them on display because I've got a couple things in the cabinet behind me. Specifically, like this item is a memory, but it also comes down to um, digital stuff. That's where you take pictures. Because back in the day, you would print them out and stick them in something, but now it's a save them or take a picture, save them, and then because I work in computers, I know you don't keep them in one spot; you put them in multiple spots. That way, when something happens, you have a spare copy. So there's lots of ways to preserve memories.
Yeah, like you mentioned, back in the olden days, we used to print the pictures out and put them in scrapbooks. So I have plenty of scrapbooks around the house, and I then migrated to creating those memory books digitally, but still having them printed out. I am a fan of having something printed out just because that's the generation I've come from. However, one of my favorite ways to preserve memories right now are my digital frames. I have a digital frame on my wall in my home, and I have a digital frame, a smaller one, on my desk at work. And I love it because not only can I upload some pictures that remind me of my favorite memories, but also I've given access to these digital frames to my family members who don't live locally. And so they can upload pictures. And so it's always a wonderful surprise to see new pictures pop up on my digital frames that have been shared by my people in other places. So that I think that's a great way to preserve memories. You can put up you can put family pictures on there, you can put vacation pictures on there, whatever you want. So, but in today's easy technology world, we can snap a million pictures and then just let them sit on our phones. Are they doing any good just sitting on our phones?
Um, so it's one of those that it depends on who you are. Some people they only look at photos on their phone, so that's the best place to have them. Other people they let them take pictures and let them rot, and it's just one of those that Grant, I have one of those traditional guy photo albums where you have occasionally people in it, but usually say, "Why'd you take a picture of a hammer?" Because I need to get a new one.
I do that too. I will take pictures of things around my home that I need to replace or replenish or repair or whatever. So I do that also. Also on my phone, uh, I have albums created on my phone, and so when I take pictures of either scenery or family or grandkids, I will move those photos into those separate albums on my phone. And then again, because I like to print things out, toward the end of the year, when I want to create a digital album of certain events, then I've already got the photos on my phone sorted into specific albums by topic, and it makes it easier to organize those. memories?
So, on the note of organizing photos, so recently, recently, it's been around for a couple years now, recent in relative long term terms. Um, but inside your phone's photos section, you can search, and somehow it knows magically if you're searching for a person. Somehow it does a okay job finding a person. If you're looking for a
What?
tree, it can pull up a tree.
What? Are you
Yeah,
serious? I want to grab my phone right
granted,
now. So you're saying
depending on
if I pick up my phone right now, you're saying that I can go to my pictures and well, there is a search button. So I click search.
and sometimes your phone learns who
What
people are.
what are you looking for? I'm looking for a picture of a dog. I pulled up pictures of dogs.
Wow.
Wow. What else should I search for? Give me something. Pick a random word. Pull a random word out of your head. Quick, fast. First one you think of.
Grandkid.
Grandkid. Search.
Oh, probably it's not that close. Try kid.
Okay. Kid. There they are. I'm not going to show you though because I need their parents' permissions to show pictures of these kids. But oh, there's the grandkids. They're so cute. So cute. Okay, now I'm distracted. I could look at pictures all day long. I love looking at pictures. I love preserving memories. What else should I know should's a bad word. What else could we choose to preserve during harvest season?
Well, since you keep saying harvest season, are you talking about food? Because I'll.
I'm talking about anything. Food's the more obvious answer. When I used to have a garden, I would preserve jams, blackberry jam, raspberry jam. I would preserve salsa. I love homemade salsa. I don't currently have a garden, and so I've tried to spread the word that anybody who's making homemade salsa, I'd be happy to taste test or just even be the recipient of a couple of jars. I love homemade salsa. I also love homemade jam. And so the fact that I'm completely out of homemade jam, I don't know. The idea of buying store-bought jam just feels weird to me.
Yeah. Grand. I have sampled some of the Texas options, and I have sent you some in the past. And I'm going,
Yes, you have.
yeah.
Yes, you
Sometimes you can
have.
find some really good flavors.
Yes. I love jam on English muffins and I love jam on obviously a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. What do you like jam on? Do you eat jam?
Basically the same. Yeah, not as much as I used to.
Yeah, me either. Jam is good. Okay, what else can
Hmm.
we preserve? What about preserving friendships or relationships? And are those the same thing?
There is a difference. One is I would say, a subset of the other, but at the same
Yes.
time, not completely congruent. Um,
So, what do you
but
do to preserve friendships?
well, comes down to which category of friendship. I've got the lifelong friends that I will occasionally reach out. That it's a oh cool, good to see you again, all the way to the group of so game night this Friday, and so there's just depend what group of people you're with.
Well, and you just named two great examples. One, you said you reach out, and number two, you create an event. I think those are two great ways to preserve friendships. The first, probably being the most important, just reaching out. I'm a big believer that if somebody's name pops into your head, reach out. And it can be just as simple as a text message saying, thought of you. How are you doing? Or you could send a text message asking, are you doing okay? Depending upon your bandwidth in the current moment for the conversation, you could send a text that is just a statement, thought of you, hope you have a great day, period, end of conversation, basically. Or if you have more time available in the moment, you can text the question, I thought of you. Are you doing okay? and then that opens up a conversation. So reaching out is really important. So yeah,
Yeah, with me being me, um, depending on where they're at in the relationship status, I'll send a text, "You alive?"
yeah.
Which is just one of those going, "Haven't heard from you in a bit. Did you disappear? How you doing?" All in one very short sentence of "You alive?"
Well, and that's
Two
another
words.
really great point too, because I talked about like the extremes of your bandwidth, either 0 or 100. But the question you just posed is a more middle of the road bandwidth question. Are you alive? Because that's a yes or no question. They could just, well, hopefully they would respond yes. Um,
I've gotten a
so
couple of no's.
at least there's, well, okay, yeah, friends. Friends are funny, right?
Yep.
But if you're asking a yes or no question, it's a shorter bandwidth. But if you're asking an open-ended question, then you've got more time available to have and don't ask a big open-ended question if you do not have time right then and there to have the conversation. Because then if they call you and say, actually, no, I'm not doing okay. Can we talk? And you're walking into a business meeting, then you have to shut your friend down and say, actually, I don't have time right now. And then they would think, why did you bother reaching out? So check your, I mean, big believer, if somebody's name pops into your head, reach out, but check your bandwidth first. And so that way you don't harm the relationship.
Yeah, and granted, in some cases, yeah, send the text just before the meeting. If they call during the meeting, you call them right back after the meeting, going, "Hey, you got me just as I got sucked in," and that way you didn't close the door, but you also just did it in the timely manner that it came to me.
Yeah, I don't normally answer my personal cell phone when I'm at work, but my friend called me yesterday, and I thought it was so odd that she was calling me during the daytime that I thought, well, maybe she needs something. And I had a minute, so I answered the phone and I said, "What are you doing calling me?" And she said, "Well, what are you doing answering the phone?" I said, "Well, I thought it might be important." And she said, "Well, I was just expecting to leave a voicemail." So friends are awesome. I don't know how you define what a friend is. You did mention that you have different categories of friends, but I just think a friend is somebody that you laugh with, cry with, and feel replenished after spending time with.
Yep, that's where you can have your work friends that they stay at work. You leave them at work. You don't intend to take them home. Then you have the ones that you find them at church, at a community event, and you leave them right there. When you see them at those events, great. If you see them at the grocery store, you don't have a clue who they are because they're outside the element. But other times, you've got a friend that permeates all layers of life, and they become a best friend, and they stick around, and you can't seem to get rid of them. But it just depends.
Yeah. Okay, so we've talked about preserving memories, preserving friendships. Did you want to talk about preserving relationships, or do you think we kind of covered that with friendship?
It's about the same. It just put in the amount of effort as the tier of relationship. Uh, it I don't want to say requires, but requires is one of the closest words that it needs tending to.
Okay, speaking of tending to, what about preserving talents or skills? What if you had past tense a talent from a younger version of you that you still wished you had today? Or what if you have a talent or skill that you really enjoy today? What do you need to do to preserve that talent or skill or reclaim
Yeah.
it?
So there's a couple of ideas. So long lost skill. At one point, I could play piano, can't anymore, uh, and heck, I can't read sheet music anymore. But it's just one of those that I'm going. Eh, it, I know when the notes go up, you go up. When the notes go down, you go down. But that's about it. But it's one of those that it'd be nice, and I can always go take classes again. But I have other talents and hobbies and interests that, in my current state, are higher priority. And then one thing that you can do to preserve your current talents In some cases, whether it's pottery, art, tinkering, you can create a physical state, which technically your personal skill can deteriorate, but you have the creation that came from that talent or skill.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah. Yeah. So I think if there is a skill that is important to us, we need to devote some time to it in order to preserve that skill. And I heard somebody say the other day, and I really loved it, is that as you get older and your available time or available physical or mental capacity changes, doesn't mean you need to give up the activity or talent that you love. It just means you need to adapt. And so, as your circumstances change, instead of giving up the activity that you enjoy so much, ask yourself, what adaptive tools are out there or adaptive spaces can I access or utilize in order to continue enjoying this activity, even though my skill or ability has diminished?
Yeah, one example that I thought of is so I don't cook, I bake. And one thing that which I don't bake as often as I used to, but I found that a bread maker helps offset a lot of the laboriousness of it, where all I have to do is measure out stuff, stick it in the bread maker, and come back a couple hours later, double check that it's fully cooked, and right there I created something I like without the laboriousness of making it by hand.
Well, that's a really good point that you bring up. I mean, I am very much a person all about systems and efficiency and effectiveness. So if you enjoy parts of an activity, then find tools or aids that can streamline the parts that you don't necessarily like as much. And so that's what I heard you just describe as improving your system.
Yeah, and along that, like I've done woodworking, and you can always do hand tools, chisels, hand saws, screwdrivers, but that takes quite a bit of work. As if you go to a circular saw, you go to um, I just spaced it, and power tools. You greatly reduce your time. But then you can go to the really nice tools. So from a circular saw, you go up to a table saw, and then some people go all the way up to CNC, where it's one of those that, yes, there's a cost to it, but it really comes down to, are you getting rid of the part that just annoys you where you don't want to do it? Or are you shortcutting it to save time? Or do you really like doing the hand tool method where it's the very fine work, it's very craftsman, and you like the manualness of it? It really comes down to, yeah, you can go get a circular saw or you can hand saw it if that's what you like. And so it really comes down to, take the parts you don't like, figure out how to improve upon them, but definitely emphasize the parts you do like.
Yes, I think that's a really great point because especially when we're talking about activities that we're doing for pleasure, so hobbies, I think we've talked about hobbies before. Think about what part of the activity brings you the greatest joy and figure out how you can focus on that part. So, like you talked about woodworking, sure, yeah, you can make the process go faster with power tools. But if you enjoy the old forms of hand tools and pegs, and there's a name for it. I'm not a woodworker, so I don't know what it's called, but when I was actively gardening, I went and visited a friend so I could see her garden, and her partner had built the most amazing gateway into the garden. There were no screws, there were no nails. There was no metal. It was just all wood, and so the joints were put together with pegs, and it was the most beautiful structure. But that's what he enjoyed doing. So we have to think about what part of the process do we enjoy the most? With quilting, some people do it all by hand, including stitching the pieces together, handwork, completely done by hand. I would not enjoy that. I enjoy doing some parts by hand, some parts by machine. So we just kind of have to figure out what it is about the activity we love and find ways to adapt.
Yeah, at one point I tried my hand at foam smithing. So you take EVA foam and you form it and join it together. And I suck at it. But there's some things that I really wanted from it. But the nice thing is 3D printing gives me the precision I want. And yes, it still requires some assembly, but I understand how to work with plastics better than I do foams. Yeah, I can get better at foams, but I didn't want to. Plus, I have another tool, another method to do the exact same thing. And so it really comes down to yes, you may want to use foam for a very specific thing, and it's better to do foam smithing in that sense. But in other senses, if you want precision, accuracy, either you do it by hand very tediously, or you uh, use another tool like 3D printing to create these various items depending on what's the best tool for the job and what's the most enjoyment with those tools.
Yes, I just thought of another great thing that we could preserve. We've spoken about our activities and our skills and tools and memories. What can we do to preserve our health?
Ooh,
I've never been a big
that's the great question in America.
I've never been a big person for setting New Year's resolutions, but I really like the idea of during harvest season hitting pause and considering what it is we want to preserve. So yes, preserving health. Why did you mention that that's a big one in our country?
Well, there's lots of opinions, thoughts, and a lot of lack thereof, and so it really just comes to um, the big thing I'd say is everyone's different.
Mhm.
Everyone's health regime will be different,
Yep.
and it comes down to what works best for you.
I read a great book many years ago. I don't know if I can remember the name of it. I guess I need to work on preserving my memories. But it presented a concept about food and talked about how one of the reasons citizens of the United States struggle so much with the concept of food and their physical health and weight is because we don't eat the food that was intended for our genetics, our ancestors. Because if you think about where people live for generations, because if you think about different countries like Japan or Australia or Canada, you could quickly name certain foods that are specific to those areas, those regions. Like Australia, the first one that comes to mind is Vegemite. Um, you know, when generations live in a certain area for a long time, certain food groups are, according to this book, according to the book, so I don't know that I agree with it. It's just a concept, but it introduced the concept of one of the reasons we struggle in modern day is because we're not eating the foods that were best for our genetic structure based on our ancestry. So I don't even I'm sure I didn't even present that correctly, so I hope nobody's offended by that. But
No, I've heard that concept where eat what your ancestors eat ate
et
did. Yeah. Um, but yeah, it's just one of those that various cultures are extremely and cultures are extremely heavy on rice and beans. Others are potatoes. Others are wheat and barley, and it really just comes down to. And our current diet is sugar and corn syrup.
Right, right. And there have been studies done on that, how people from other countries who were considered physically fit prior to coming to the United States then came to the United States and began eating all of the shelf stable preserved foods and then suddenly gained weight and became more obese like so much of our population here in the United States. So there's something to be said for eating a certain way.
Yeah, there's a bunch of different things, a lot of different philosophies, but one of the things that this kind of leads into is preserving knowledge.
Ooh, ooh. I like that one. What are you doing to preserve knowledge?
Well, as we talked about in previous podcasts, as a technical person, I write too much documentation, which means it's written down somewhere. But I it's also one of those that I have learned in very recent years that yes, books are good. Books still have a purpose. Books have not been replaced by the internet. Yes, you can find the information on the internet, but one thing I have learned within the last like 2 years is there's a reason why textbooks exist, because they hold knowledge that yes, you can find it on the internet, but then you have to go validate it. You have to go find other things. As if it's in a book, which massive asterisk, there is a higher chance that it is accurate, and you don't have to go verify it with something else. But it's all of your internet searches condensed into a paper format or
Well,
a
and to that
digital.
point, though, if it's in a book doesn't mean it's accurate. It means
That's the
you're
asterisk I had.
you're more, yeah, you're more readily able to verify its accuracy. And so if you pick up a random book, there are ways you can verify its accuracy. First of all, what are the author's credentials? Does the author even have the um, the education to back up what is being stated in the book? And then who is the book published by? If it's published by a reputable publisher for that specific industry or genre, then that builds its credibility also. So there are ways to consider whether or not a book has valid information in it. First of all, does the author have the credentials and the knowledge to be presenting the information? And then who is it published by? So those are two quick ways of verifying a book's reliability.
Yeah. So I've been buying textbooks recently, and yes, you have to manually search them because I got the paper copy. But it's also one of those that it's easier to index what you're looking for. It's easier to glean very specific information because I've got, I think, 3 books on plastics, which, yes, I can go read about plastics online, one of which says this material is good for this material is good for that. And yes, I can go Google it, but this one breaks down a lot more information that I would never think about. And so,
Yeah, and also there's a time and a place for an actual book. You know, we spend so much of our lives today in front of a computer screen or a tablet screen or a phone screen. Sometimes it's nice to unplug, pick up an actual book, go sit out on your patio and enjoy the fresh air and read a book. Something I've been doing lately, which I've really thoroughly enjoyed, is I've been taking an actual physical book with me out in my kayak out on the water. And so I will paddle
I
out
thought paper and
wherever.
water didn't go together.
Well, I put the book in a Ziploc to start with just to make sure it gets
Oh,
out there safely. But then once I'm out to whatever point, wherever I want to be in the water, then I stow my paddle and I pull out my book and I sit there. I even have a pair of reading glasses on my kayak for easy grab. And so I will sit there and read my book until I've drifted too much in the direction I don't want to go. And then I'll set my book down and I'll paddle back to wherever I want to be. But so I've really been enjoying that. And, you know, ducks will swim up to me and ask me what I'm reading, and I'll tell them. And then they paddle away. But yeah.
so another part of preserving knowledge is teaching others,
Oh, yes.
because there's some things that yes, you can put it in a book, but there is something special about someone showing you how to do it versus you reading on a book on how to do it. Because a book can have 4 pages on something that is whoop, and you're done.
Well, and to that point, it's a great way to build your skills also. You've never done something, so you go to a source to learn about it, like you mentioned a book, and then you could go to an actual person who can teach you more about the concept, but then you get to the point where you've learned the skill well enough to share it with somebody else, and then you get to a point where you've mastered the skill so that you can teach others. And so that continues to build your repertoire of skills, is going along that path of knowing nothing, knowing a little, researching, reading more, learning from a person, sharing it with someone else, and then teaching it to other people.
Yeah, plenty of ways to preserve knowledge, and there's plenty more that uh, we don't have time to go through today.
But a fun
So,
topic, right?
yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
What else you got for today?
Well, I think that wraps it up for today. I had fun talking about what we've been preserving, what we want to strive to preserve during harvest season and going forward. So, hey, everybody listening, tell us what you're working or striving to preserve. Do you preserve memories? Are you doing something to preserve knowledge, preserve friendships, relationships? Leave us a comment, click all the buttons, like, forward, share, and we will catch you next time on the next episode of What Else You Got with Mitch and Margot. See you later.